Everyone knows Cleopatra seduced powerful men. That's the story history loves to tell. Beautiful queen, romantic affairs, dramatic suicide. But here's what they don't tell you. Cleopatra wasn't a seductress, she was a monopolist. She controlled the most valuable commodity in the ancient world, grain, and she used it like a weapon. Every romantic alliance was a trade deal. Every political move was market manipulation. She didn't win men with beauty, she won them with leverage. This is the real story of how one woman almost bought the Roman Empire. Let's start with what Cleopatra actually controlled. Egypt, not just any Egypt, the richest grain-producing region on Earth. The Nile flooded every year, deposited nutrient-rich silt across the delta, created the most fertile farmland in the Mediterranean. Egypt produced more grain than any other territory, millions of tons annually, and Rome needed every bushel, because Rome had a population problem. 1 million people in the city, none of them farming, all of them needing to eat. Rome imported grain or Rome starved. Simple equation. And Egypt supplied 40% of Rome's grain. Cleopatra knew this. She knew Rome's dependence. She knew dependency creates leverage. But she also knew something else. Egypt didn't just produce grain, it produced luxury goods, papyrus. The only writing material that mattered, every contract, every law, every letter, written on Egyptian papyrus. Perfumes and cosmetics, unguents and oils. Wealthy Romans demanded them. Glass production. Egyptian glassmakers were the finest in the world. Textiles and dyes. Linen so fine it was transparent. Purple dye worth more than gold. All from Egypt. All controlled by the crown. All controlled by Cleopatra. This wasn't just agricultural wealth. This was vertical integration across multiple luxury industries. She controlled production. She controlled distribution. She set the prices. This was monopoly power. Now here's where it gets strategic. Cleopatra looked at the Roman civil wars and saw an opportunity. Julius Caesar versus Pompey, Mark Antony versus Octavian. These weren't just political conflicts. They were bidding wars. Whoever won needed resources, money, grain, ships, soldiers. Cleopatra had all of it, but she wasn't giving it away. She was selling it for political power, for territorial expansion, for revenue guarantees. Every alliance was a transaction. Every romance was a negotiation. When Julius Caesar arrived in Egypt chasing Pompey, Cleopatra was 21 years old, just overthrown by her brother. No army, no power, no leverage, except one thing. Caesar needed grain, his troops needed food, his war needed funding. Cleopatra made him an offer: support my claim to the throne. I'll supply your war, unlimited grain, Egyptian gold, naval support, the price. Recognize me as Egypt's sole ruler. Guarantee Egypt's independence. Protect my trade monopolies. Caesar agreed, not because she was beautiful, because she offered the best deal. The grain started flowing. Caesar's war chest filled. His legions stayed fed. He won his war. And Cleopatra got her throne. That's not seduction. That's contract negotiation. But Cleopatra went further. She had a child with Caesar, Caesarion. Everyone assumes this was romance. It wasn't. It was succession planning. If Caesar acknowledged the boy, if Rome accepted him as heir, then Cleopatra's son would control both Egypt and Rome. The two greatest economies in the Mediterranean merged under one dynasty. This would make Egypt a partner, not a province, an equal, not a subject. She was playing for the ultimate prize, economic and political fusion. A new empire with Egyptian wealth and Roman military power. Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE destroyed this plan, but Cleopatra wasn't done. Enter Mark Antony, 1/3 of the Roman world after Caesar's death. He controlled the eastern provinces. He was fighting Parthia. He needed money, he needed grain, he needed ships, he needed everything Egypt could provide. Cleopatra saw another opportunity. Same playbook, better terms. She met Antony at Tarsus in 41 BCE. The famous barge scene, gold-plated ship, purple sails, exotic perfumes. Everyone remembers the spectacle. Nobody remembers the negotiation. Cleopatra offered Antony unlimited resources for his Parthian campaign. The cost? 4 things. First, recognize Egypt's territorial claims. Cyprus, Crete, Parts of Syria, oil-producing regions, timber-producing regions, more resources, more monopolies. Second, eliminate my rivals, kill my sister Arsinoe, remove anyone who could challenge my throne. Third, legitimize our children, make them heirs to both Egyptian and Roman power. Fourth, defend Egypt's economic independence. No Roman taxation, no Roman governors, no interference in trade. Antony agreed to everything. Because he needed what she had: the grain, the gold, the ships, the political stability in the East. She wasn't bribing him with beauty. She was making him an offer he couldn't refuse. And it worked. For a decade, Cleopatra and Antony ran the Eastern Mediterranean like a joint venture. She controlled production and capital. He controlled military force and political legitimacy. Together they dominated trade routes, controlled grain prices, manipulated currency exchange, built a navy, minted coins with both their faces, showing partnership, showing equality. This wasn't romance. This was a corporate merger. The wealth flowed to Egypt. The military power came from Rome. Both sides benefited, until Octavian decided he wanted it all. Octavian saw what was happening. Antony was becoming an Eastern king. Cleopatra was buying Roman power. Their children were designated heirs to massive territories. This threatened Rome's Western aristocracy, threatened Octavian's own position. So he did what monopolists do when facing competition. He launched a propaganda war. He couldn't attack Antony directly. Antony was a Roman hero, popular with the troops, politically connected. So Octavian attacked Cleopatra instead. Called her a foreign temptress, a corrupting influence, an oriental seductress, claimed she'd bewitched Antony, made him abandon Roman values. It was brilliant and completely false. But propaganda doesn't need to be true, it needs to be effective. Octavian convinced the Roman Senate that Cleopatra was the threat, not Antony, that she was trying to conquer Rome, control the grain supply, dominate Mediterranean trade, which was partially true, just not the way Octavian framed it. She wasn't conquering, she was trading, she wasn't dominating, she was monopolizing, but Octavian made it sound like invasion. The Senate declared war, not on Antony, on Cleopatra. This gave Octavian legal cover to attack Antony. Framed as protecting Rome from foreign control, it was political genius. The Battle of Actium in 31 BCE wasn't just a military defeat, it was a market collapse. Cleopatra's entire strategy depended on military power protecting her economic position. When Antony's forces broke, when the battle was lost, her monopoly position vanished. She couldn't enforce trade terms without military backing. She couldn't maintain independence without protection. Octavian was coming, and he wouldn't negotiate. He'd annex, turn Egypt into a Roman province, seize the grain monopoly, take the wealth. Everything she'd built for 2 decades, gone. Tried one last negotiation. Offered Octavian the same deal she'd offered Caesar and Antony. Unlimited grain, Egyptian gold, political submission, just let her children rule as client kings, keep some independence, maintain some control. Octavian refused. He didn't need to negotiate. He was about to win everything anyway. Why share power when you can take it all? Cleopatra saw the mathematics. No deal was possible. No terms would be accepted. Octavian would parade her through Rome in chains. Display her as a conquered enemy. Use her humiliation to legitimize his rule. Then kill her and her children anyway. Take Egypt regardless. So she made her last strategic move. Suicide on her own terms, before Octavian could take her prisoner. This denied him the propaganda victory, denied him the triumph parade, denied him the spectacle of defeated foreign queen. It was defiance, but it was also practical because she'd already secured something. Octavian promised to spare her children if she died quietly, probably a lie, but maybe not. It was the only card she had left, so she played it. August 30 BCE. Cleopatra died, and Octavian took Egypt. And here's what happened next. Everything Cleopatra had tried to prevent. Egypt became a Roman province, but not a regular province. An imperial possession, directly controlled by the emperor. No Senate oversight, no provincial governors, complete monopoly control. Why? Because Egypt's grain was too valuable, too strategic, too important to Roman survival. Octavian understood what Cleopatra had known all along: control Egypt, control Rome's food supply, control Rome. So he seized the monopoly, made it a state asset, used grain distribution to buy political loyalty, free grain for Roman citizens, paid with Egyptian production. This kept the population happy, prevented riots, maintained his power. For the next 300 years, Egypt's grain fed Rome. Every emperor controlled it personally. Because losing Egypt meant losing Rome, the dependency Cleopatra had identified, the leverage she'd exploited, it persisted, just with different management. Rome never escaped Egyptian grain dependence, not until the empire collapsed. The strategic resource she'd controlled remained strategic for centuries. She'd been right about everything, except her ability to maintain control. But here's the real legacy. Cleopatra proved something no one wanted to admit: that economic power could challenge military power, that monopoly control could buy political influence, that a small nation with strategic resources could negotiate with empires. She almost pulled it off. 2 Roman generals, decades of independence, territorial expansion, economic dominance. She lost in the end, but she'd shown the playbook: control essential resources, trade them for political power, use economic leverage to survive militarily superior enemies. And the world never forgot. Every oil-producing nation learned this lesson. Every strategic resource monopolist studied this model. OPEC, Saudi Arabia, rare earth elements in China, lithium in South America. The pattern repeats. Small nations with strategic resources, negotiating with larger powers, using economic leverage, trading access for protection. Cleopatra did this 2,000 years ago, with grain and papyrus instead of oil and lithium. Different commodities, same strategy. Control what others need, make them negotiate, maintain leverage, survive through economics when military power isn't enough. History calls her a seductress because men wrote the history, but look at what she actually did. Took a bankrupt kingdom, built it into an economic powerhouse, negotiated equal terms with Rome, maintained independence for decades, expanded territory, controlled multiple monopolies, manipulated currency markets, ran international trade networks. This wasn't seduction. This was statecraft. This was economics. This was strategy. She understood leverage. She understood dependency. She understood that whoever controls essential resources controls the negotiation. Rome needed Egyptian grain. Cleopatra made them pay for it, with political recognition, with territorial concessions, with dynastic arrangements. She turned dependency into power, need into leverage, trade into sovereignty. Her name was Cleopatra, and she wasn't a seductress. She was the ancient world's greatest trade negotiator. She controlled the grain. She controlled the luxury goods. She controlled the capital, and for 20 years, she made Rome negotiate, not conquer, not dictate, negotiate. That's power, that's legacy. Everything else is just propaganda.